You're like the famous photographer Lance Mercer, and it's Coffee Julie.
Hi.
Hi. And Lance Mercer.
Come on, we're gonna get a picture of behind us. How do we do that?
Can
Lance
you,
Mercer, will you take a picture
so
of
Coffee Julie.
of me and Lori?
Julie.
You want a selfie or do you
Coffee
want, like...
Julie. Coffee Julie. What whack-a-mole number is this?
175.
I don't know. You don't know what it is. All right. See you guys. See you guys later.
Here, let me get my...
Bye.
Oh, there.
Bye.
Maggie!
Good to see you again.
We love you! Maggie, we love you!
Hey, it's Mazzy, and this is Whack-A-Mole number 174, where I randomly pull 5 records and showcase them for you. It gives me a chance to pull some things maybe I haven't heard, and actually, 9 times out of 10, I'll after this listen to these records upstairs. So I pull them from my collection. I want to thank Coffee Julie at the beginning, that little intro. We were down at Pike's Place the other evening, and she said 175, so she was so close, just one off. But last time we did this was our Halloween extravaganza. If you want to see more of these whack-a-moles, there's a whole playlist and you can see these random pulls. They're just kind of fun. Sometimes I have friends here and we do a little different take on it where it's not quite as random, but we just go through the collection and have a chat and have a hangout. And that's what I think people seem to love. So I'm going to pull 5 records from my collection and showcase them to you, and we'll see what comes up. I do actually end up playing these. So these are going to be my listening records for the next few hours, probably. 1, 2, 3, 4. A little tight there. And 5. Let's see what we came up with today. Well, this is kind of a rarity. Well, it's a 70s issue on the Archive series. This is the Hillman. This is I almost want to say newgrass, but it's a bluegrass record of the Hillman. And this is Chris Hillman, who would later join the Byrds as their bass player. And of course, years later, he would be one of the founding members with Graham Parsons of the Flying Burrito Brothers. And of course, the Rose City Band. I mean, he was always a fan of bluegrass and country. And in fact, Roger McGuinn, too, was a folk singer and played with Judy Collins as a backing second guitarist or the main guitarist when she toured early on in the 60s prior to starting the Byrds in 1963, 64. Chris Hillman, I just love him. He did a wonderful record about 4 years ago, a solo record, which is really good. But this is a wonderful record. It's got Vern Gosdin on guitar and lead vocals from the Gosdin brothers, who actually the whole, 6 Degrees of Separation worked with Gene Clark on his first record when he left the Byrds as well. And of course, 2 of the Gosdin brothers are on here. But some typical folk records, bluegrass, traditional songs on here, as well as one Bob Dylan cover. An album, a song that I really like called "When the Ship Comes In." When the ship comes in, all the time will stop when the wind is up and the sea seems to be a breezing. I remember the lyrics. I remember that because at summer camp, that was one of the songs. There's always a guy with a guitar that leads us in song. And when the ship comes in, the Dylan song. And I remember at the time not being super familiar with that song. It's really a deep album cut, I guess, as Bob Dylan songs go. But it's a fantastic song. There are a couple originals on here by the Gosdin brothers. And there's Pete Seeger song, Mabel Carter song, Fair and Tender Ladies, and a Woody Guthrie song on here. So this is produced by the infamous producer Jim Dixon, who later, am I confusing him with Jim Dixon? He also worked with the Byrds later on, and many other groups, including, I'm getting this wrong, Ry Cooder, but that's maybe Jim Dickinson. Anyway, that's it. And this is a DJ stamped copy. But this is a reissue, I think, from the 1970s. There you go. The Dillards. the Hillman, excuse me, Hillman, named after Chris Hillman. Oh, we're sticking in this new grass, bluegrass thing today. We're getting a little organic today. This is an amazing record. This came out in I'm thinking 75, 76. And this is Hillbilly Jazz. And this also, this was on, was it Rounder Records, I believe this was on? I think, oh, Flying Fish, probably, Flying Fish. A very acoustic bass label in the 1970s and into the 80s and beyond. Hillbilly Jazz has, David Bromberg, so he has some of the new artists of the time, or the younger generation. But then has Vassar Clements on violin, DJ Fontana, Sam Pruitt, Kenneth Smith, Gordon Terry. This is such a good record. This is sort of a mix of bluegrass, of country swing. It's a double album. If you ever see this, if you like roots music, if you like acoustic music, bluegrass, folk music, this is a must-have. But it really gets into that Western swing, which is a hybrid of country and jazz. Hillbilly Jazz on Flying Fish Records, mid-70s. I don't know the exact date. I'm thinking maybe 74, 75. I could be wrong, but it's around that period of time. Fantastic record. A really great sounding record, well-recorded record. This is, okay, we're getting a little different thing. This is the Doors live at the Matrix in San Francisco. There's been, two or three volumes of this, and recently there was an expanded full set with even better tapes. They found a better generation of tapes of these Matrix tapes, and that came out recently in a box set. I don't have that. I have two of the Record Store Day issues here, live the Doors, and these are basically board tapes, and they're pretty decent. They're not big audiophile masterpieces. The Matrix was a club, infamous small club. I never went there because I was too young, and it was a 21 or over bar, essentially, club. Not a big place. Over the last decade or so, there's been some live records from tapes from there of the Velvet Underground, the Matrix. I have that box set. It was co-owned initially by Marty Ballin of the Jefferson Airplane, wrong, San Francisco band, down on below Union Street and Cow Hollow area on Fillmore Street. And it's been different incarnations. The last I remember, now it's called the White Rabbit, kind of a hipster, Zen, almost like Buddha bar stuff, a little too slick for my taste. But I've been in the space over the years, but obviously not as a Matrix. But this is 1967. So these, as I recall, this show was like soon after the first album, their debut came out. Doors at the Matrix. If you're a Doors person, these are essential. But if you don't have any Doors, I would start obviously with their proper albums, and then maybe the double live album, the proper live album that came out. Oh, okay. This is a reissue, or basically an album that came out in the last several years. This is an excellent record of psychedelia, the Sons of Adam, Saturday Sons. This is a complete recordings from 1964 and 1966. Most of this was recorded, I believe, at the Avalon Ballroom in San Francisco, or one of them, that's right. Now I remember, I got to remind myself. But one is a complete show at the Avalon in 1966. It sounds actually pretty good. And the other LP are singles and outtakes. And obviously they never really made it. I have a couple of, I have a handbill of one of the shows they're on with all the other bands. They're psychedelic garage rock, and I don't even remember where they're from. When this came out, I jumped on it. Randy Holden was the main musician in the band, and they were a quartet, and he was the one that really kind of pushed this band. And I just don't remember all the details. But this is if you like garage rock that sort of veers into the psychedelic period. This is really an amazing comp. And this came out again on High Moon Records. I don't know the label beyond that, but these lacquers were cut by Kevin Gray. So for what this is, the sound is really good. And again, if you like garage and psychedelic and that whole like mid 60s, 65, 66 stuff, this is an incredible record. Vinyl Richie approved. Now, one of This is One Trick Pony by Paul Simon. This didn't get a lot of love, mainly because, not that the album is bad, but this was a soundtrack to a very self-absorbed or narcissistic, in a way, film that Paul Simon really put together, One Trick Pony, and this is his soundtrack to it, about a musician. It's not quite as bad as Paul McCartney's Give My Regards to Broad Street, but it's up there in that. But there was a hit off this, or somewhat of a hit. I don't know if it was a top 10 hit, but Late in the Evening is a great song. In fact, the music on this album is really good. He created this album especially for the movie. And there's some times where a movie can suck, but a soundtrack can be great. I think he got Delusions of Grandeur, having one terrible line or two in Annie Hall, Woody Allen's movie, Annie Hall. So he wasn't really good in this. What else can I say? This came out in 1980. So what is that? 4 years or so? 3 or 4 years after Annie Hall. Paul Simon's acting career didn't last very long for a good reason, but Paul Simon's One Trick Pony. Oh, and lastly, this is a Maslov approved edition. For some reason, there's certain records around this time in 71, 72, where I would put my name on records. I don't remember why. I think it's maybe I brought them over to friends' houses. I don't do that a lot, but I've been finding maybe 50 records I have with the Maslov approved. Of course, Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen. This is a fantastic live record. Part of the deal was they funded, A&M Records funded this massive tour with all these musicians. I mean, talk about, too many people on the road. Like, we're talking about Hard Rain, like Dylan's Hard Rain, Rolling Thunder Review, but not probably with a bigger budget, ironically. And the trade-off was A&M would get the album, would get a great album out of it. Joe Cocker had done 3 albums, I guess, 3 solo albums that Danny Cordell produced, who had worked with previously with Procol Harum, then put all his efforts into Rod Stewart. Of course, Woodstock really launched Rod Stewart. Whoa, that's Freudian, not Rod Stewart. Woodstock really launched Joe Cocker to the masses. But those versions, I mean, I really appreciate, if you're going to cover a Beatles song, do it your way and make it yours. And, with a little help from my friends, he did it his way. The Letter, the Box Tops song, he made it his. All those great arrangements, the funkiness to it, they're just blue-eyed soul, at its finest. And this was a great tour that Leon Russell basically became the band leader and pulled all these musicians together, did all the arrangements. This is a massive, wonderful group of musicians. You got Leon Russell on guitar, Don Preston rhythm guitar, Carl Rattle, great bass player, the tempestuous 2 drummers. You got both Jim Gordon, and you got Jim Keltner, of course. And you got Chuck Blackwell and some percussion and drums too, and other percussion. You got Sandy Kononov on percussion. You got congas. You got Bobby Keys. And then you got the choir, obviously, Claudia Lanier, Rita Coolidge, and others, Pamela Polland, and Matthew Moore. And this was like a hippie entourage. And the part of the deal, too, was not only the record, but was the movie. And the movie was a pretty big hit for rock and roll circles. And you should check it out. Mad Dogs and Englishmen, On the Road, this whole sense of music. It sounds really good. I mentioned Jim Gordon, Tempestuous. He just died in the last year. Obviously, he's been in prison for many decades, have some mental issues, drug-related and mental issues, and he killed his mother. I mentioned on a recent video this book on our Hooli Records, which on Chris Strockwitz, which is a fabulous book written by Joel Selvin with Chris, the late Chris Strockwitz. That's out, but Joe Selvin next year is going to have a book on Jim Gordon, which is probably an amazing, tragic story. But I tell you, Jim Gordon in the 70s especially, he probably had the best groove for a live drummer on the road. Whenever you hear him with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends on that album, on this album, he played with, obviously, Derek and the Dominoes with Eric Clapton. his driving groove was amongst the best. Great studio drummer. You know, you could argue all the bullshit stuff he got into because on Layla, the song Layla, that piano part, he takes credit for that piano outridge, what do you call it? Outro on Layla from Derek and the Dominoes. And he didn't write it. He really ripped it off from Rita Coolidge, apparently, which is kind of bullshit. But this is a fantastic live record. I haven't heard this in a long time. And of course, my guess is if you can find a clean copy, and they're probably not clean, I always suggest this is the best label sound-wise of the A&M records. The kind of shit Brendel, brownish label of Warner Brothers, late 60s into early 70s. Equivalent, their version, to what the green Warner Brothers label around the same period went to Warner Brothers. If you can find those records. I know I don't always emphasize the sound, but it's the music first, but then if you're going to do it, you might as well get the best sounding version you can. Unfortunately, this is one of those records that it was a big party record. Everyone played it. That's why I probably brought it to someone else's house. But anyway, Mad Dogs and Englishmen for the finale. Thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate all your support. We'll see you next time. Mazzy loves you. Take care.